from the different policies that have been followed in Morocco in order to improve the health care of the child and the mother. I have a question for Mr. Chatterjee. On voit le progrès.
Nutrition for the mother, the early, for the children. But how do you? What is the? What could be the strategies? Good practices to avoid differentiating between people on the rural areas, maybe compared to urban areas, rich people, poor people. How do you? What strategies could be efficient to reduce those differences?
Thank you very much for the question. And before I start, I think it's important to recognize that there is no one strategy that will fit every country, that will fit every context. We do have to realize that any strategy that is, or mix of strategies for correcting what have been long-held disparities and inequities will really need to take a very system-oriented approach, which means we look at issues that are what are traditionally called as supply-side issues, whether these are health facilities being provided, whether these are health workers being made available, whether these are supplies for health and nutrition interventions that are being made available, as well as demand-side issues, which involves availability of knowledge, of changes in behavior, of financial ability of families and communities to be able to access those services. There are approaches that many countries have used. What Morocco will use will have to depend on a very good analysis of what the bottlenecks in this country are. And we had an opportunity to see some of them yesterday. We saw immense progress. We also saw some places where there was some untapped potential. Some of the more simpler ones that are done are increasing how do we amplify the impact of existing health facilities or health workers. And these can be done through outreach services. These can be done through community health programs. These can be done through mobile teams, depending on what the context and what the terrain and what the demographic composition of communities are. At the same time, on the demand side, we can make huge progress and bring about immense change if we focus on changing behaviors, if we change on ensuring that financial access and the financial barriers are reduced. Yesterday, when we went to one of the facilities, we heard what is the biggest thing that people wanted, a young woman wanted to change, was the road network. And we realized that what an immense change it can make, a proper road that is enabling a woman who's pregnant and in labor can access services. So it's a mix of interventions on the supply side as well as on the demand side. I think many of the answers in Morocco are known. There is probably need to put this together in a good sort of analysis to give us what might be needed for different parts of the country.
Thank you very much. Mr. Abdoulaye. Alors,
So, Mr. Abdullah, you're a practitioner, you are working on the terrain in Senegal. Could you give us some testimonial from your experience to improve the healthcare of the mother and children in terms of nutrition? What you are doing? Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be able to share the experience of Senegal as to the progress concerning fighting malnutrition. The history of Senegal is too long to narrate, but I would going to dwell on certain principles that we have really adopted concerning the development of nutrition in our country. First point is the multi-sectoriality, the cross-cutting nature, and second one, decentralization, and the third one was the community-based approach with the focus on prevention and the community-based leadership. And the third principle is the scale passage as to the cross-cutting the nature. I work for the account of the government structure that is called the Cell for Fighting Malnutrition, which is made up of different ministries, technical ministries who have a direct role on the question of malnutrition, and also local governments which are represented, as well as civil society. And this structure has a high anchorage since 1995 between the presidency and the prime minister's office that doesn't exist. This still is anchored at the general secretariat at the government. That is always a high level, to facilitate this coordination between the different sectors, which in fact have a very precise role to play as to the determinant of the malnutrition. By adopting this multi-sectorial approach, we are going to go ahead for multi-sectorial interventions, and we'll talk about this in the field of nutrition. We categorize them in terms of specific nutrition specific interventions, and also interventions sensitive to nutrition. Now it's how in order to intervene to see to it that we are going to arrive at the community level with the specific and interventions, and those sensitive that are really adapted to the local context and to the community. This is the pathway to which we are going to go. The main thing is, or the principle is, that to have the communities and local governments in mind, because we know very well that as to decentralization, it's the local governments that are responsible for local developments. So local governments carry malnutrition, they integrate malnutrition in their policies, policies of development, and considering their capacity, we create a bridge between local governments and civil society, because civil society has this offer this window of opportunity with its networking at the community level, and with its multi-sectorial intervention. We have a series of NGOs or local associations who are already on the ground at the community level and which intervene. So these local governments that go into a contract with civil society for the delivery of services of community services. They are on the other side concerning the aspect that's concerned deconcentration. In fact, all the ministries which are member of CLM, and through the concentrated services intervene also at the level of the community in order to accompany them and to offer to them the services specific to the malnutrition, which are part of their mandate. But the most important point is the community. The approach we have adopted really is a community-based approach, as we say in English, community-led approach. It's the community itself that delivers the services. When you go to the community level, you'll find these players, these actors, these stakeholders, and the central stakeholder, the community, is the community relay. That is the outcome of the village, of the neighborhood. It's the one that delivers the services of nutrition with the really preventive approach in order to impact the child of less than 2 years old. This very child, before his birth, his mother has benefited from advice, counseling concerning nutrition for pregnant women, and this mother has been oriented for counseling and has been supported in case of difficulties. Quite often, iron for childbearing is very important for the mother and for the development of the behavior, and also for the delivery of services. And you see here all the players and the municipal council, which is at the heart with civil society, and the technical services that are deconcentrated, that play the role of supervisor, of supervision, follow-up, post-training, and also to see to the respect of the standards, norms, and protocols. And there are many protocols and standards, norms such as zinc and iron, and you see the steering committee, which in fact chosen by the community. You have the head of the village, you have the representatives of women, the representatives of young people who are responsible for the governance of this approach, which is a community approach which aims at the building of a platform, a community platform at the most decentralized level, the most operational level. That's how we schematize a little our approach in order to reduce malnutrition. Thank you, Mr. Luka. Thank you for these explanations. I have a question, Mr. Haller Elderman, which
Early learning, investing in nutrition for the mothers. And others are talking about a good investment. It's a very good investment, and it's a very profitable investment for the community. What is your view about this?
Thank you. The first message I would do, if I could talk to the Minister of Finance, is to inform him or her that investment in nutrition is not something you do as a social program to help the people who have been left out of economic growth. It is core to 21st century growth, and the evidence is extensive. There's a fair amount of evidence that show that taller workers earn more. And I'm not talking about for Pakistan and India, which it's also true for. I'm talking about the United States and Norway. This is a general point, and there's a lot of evidence that show that people who are better nourished have more schooling, or else they learn more in school for each year. And this has been one way this has been shown in 2004, and then again 2008, and then again 2012. They asked experts in various fields, from trade reform, agriculture, also including nutrition, to make the case for the economic returns of their field. And then these studies were reviewed by a team of Nobel laureates, 5 different Nobel laureates who, in economics, plus other experts. In each case, in each of these studies, each of these comparisons, nutrition interventions came out on top as the highest economic returns compared to the conventional returns, what you'd think of, the infrastructure, the construction. Yet, when I talk to the average World Bank director or ministers of finance, they still sort of say, but we're trying to modernize our economy. We need infrastructure. Well, nutrition interventions are modernizing. It's not about brawn, it's about brains. It's about skills, both soft skills, the interaction with your colleagues, and hard skills, just to be able to do your math and so forth. So this is something that is pervasive. So it's not the point that nutrition has economic returns. The question now is, what type of nutrition interventions give you those returns? And many of them are very front-loaded. We've mentioned this a few times now. It's the prenatal interventions. You give iron and folic acid to the pregnant woman, or even prior to conception, you get impacts on cognitive ability that you cannot ever replace at age 2 or 5. Or you do iodine prenatally, you cannot replace the deficiency later on in life. Even breastfeeding, which is probably the #1 nutrition intervention that we would all advocate, doesn't change stature. It changes mortality and morbidity, and it changes IQ. So the general point is, although we use stature stunting as an indication of progress in nutrition, in fact, nutrition is much broader, has a lot to do with micronutrients, has a lot to do with the interaction of the caregiver and the child, and so that the more we can do early on in integrating the caregiving process, the full caregiving process, not just that which leads to stature, the more that we will have the skills for a modern economy.
Thank you very much for this testimonial. The Minister.
Mrs. Leila Al-Imran, you have reassured us as to the progress that has taken place past 20 years. Can you tell us a few words about the perspectives and the role of INDH in the implementation? And we have seen the signature convention between the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of the Interior. How do you see the evolution in the future? First of all, before answering your question, because I haven't had the occasion to talk to you about the progress also in fighting malnutrition nationwide, because I talked also only about the aspects of healthcare and mortality. You need to say that Morocco, as it is the case for the international community, has been engaged for a few decades now to fight all forms of malnutrition. This has been translated by the development and the implementation of many strategic programs interventions in favor of nutrition, such as energetic malnutrition and fighting also shortages and fortification of basic food and supplementation of medication, folic acids, and also for children in zinc and vitamin A and D, and also the promotion of the breastfeeding and its protection. And this, thanks to these efforts, also we have seen over the years a drop in the cases of malnutrition, especially in ponderal insufficiency, which went from 10.2% to 2.9% between 2004 and 2018. Same tendency for emaciations that went from 9.3% to 2.6%, and less degrees, that is delay of growth, which went from 18 to 15% during the same period, with a persistence of inequalities on the basis of residency places. That is to say, that the rural world is more affected by this form of malnutrition, and also than the urban world, and also regional disparities. And you see in this map, there are certain regions that are affected by the delay of growth, which has attained 30% in certain regions. So now, concerning perspectives, the Ministry of Healthcare has just instituted a national nutrition program, which considers that the highlight or the accent should be put on the choice of integrating a continuum since analysis until the taking in charge of the nutritional and also the importance of orienting measures for the most vulnerable population segments, mainly children and women, and also places that are more affected by this form of malnutrition, and also to adopt a participative approach. We need to make the community participate in the whole process of the implementation of intervention, since the identification of needs and the creation of the demand, and also to meet this demand or these needs through actions that are efficient and accepted by the populations. And also among the other orienting principles is the intersectoriality, which I believe in my mind has been raised by the different speakers. Intersectoriality is the key of success of any intervention in terms of the promotion of public health care and the promotion of nutrition. And also, I think that INDH, through its different platforms nationwide, mainly Dar Umuma, which is a community based structure managed in collaboration with the local governments, local communes, and civil society, which constitutes a lever for the promotion of nutrition through the participation of the community in all the actions that aim at fighting malnutrition. And this also has one of the entities of coordination and governance that have the capacity and the mandate to federate all the players around this issue and try to make them involved further in planning, the planning of multi-sectorial activities and actions, and to ensure the follow-up, evaluation, and see to the implementation of such activities through the establishment of a follow-up and evaluation system. For me, the two keys success for any intervention in terms of nutrition is the community participation and the intersectoriality, and I think INDH can bring its support as to these two points. Thank you, Mr. Abdullahi. Concerning this question of intersectoriality, a few words from your experience. You talked about multisectoriality yourself. I believe it's the real word. The big question is how. In Senegal, as to the how, we have tried to find what could be bring together all of these sectors, because there are many of them, and in the key processes, above all that of planning and strategic orientation, how can we, as a multiple sector, how can we work together on processes of planning, strategic planning, and the and for first definition of policies. What we have done in Senegal is to imagine in a participative way with all the stakeholders, all the sectors, the house of malnutrition. What would it be? That is, what would be the pillars of nutrition in Senegal from 2015 to 2025? Because in 2015 that we have reviewed our nutrition policy. This is the house we have with pillars that concern production aspects, that is high value, high nutritive value foods, tarification, distribution, and two other pillars that concern aspects linked to the services when we talk about healthcare, education, social protection, etc. Four pillars that hold the house. This house, this is what is the human development. In order to lead to the human development, we think that nutrition would contribute by optimizing the nutritional status of the population and to host the visitors at the malnutrition house. The approach was solid and large so that we can take into account all the needs of the visitors of the House of Nutrition concerning aspects of capacity building, follow-up and monitoring and evaluation, financing, governance, and above all, territorial development. Because I talked before about this principle of decentralization in a, you see, in a way, together we worked on a vision for all the sectors. So if we were to talk about nutrition in Senegal, there is what we see, and it's really this multisectoriality with all the sectors that succeed, in fact, that succeed to fill up the gaps